webinar session to ensure that indeed you take the most out of this webinar. And as we move forward, I'd like to note, and you've just heard it, the webinar is being recorded and you will be able to access it on YouTube. In some parts, it might be quite dense. There's a lot of information. Given that this webinar is part of a larger project that is focused actually on fighting corruption in the Western Balkans as part of enlargement reprioritization. TEP has had pleasure to involve multiple colleagues in the project, but none of this would have been possible without the support of the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation. And we sincerely thank their forward-looking approach to this matter, because indeed, as enlargement is picking up its pace, the more the anti-corruption efforts will matter. Because, and I can tell you from first-hand experience, I've been in Brussels for an entire week, day and night. Indeed, Western Balkans is being discussed. In particular, the frontrunners, Albania and Montenegro, who are indeed expected to have their accession acts being drafted very soon in order to ensure they are signed upon all chapter closure. And then we would have the ratification period. But nonetheless, there are deep concerns, of course, that despite the progress, the Union will have to do its best to ensure there is no democratic backsliding upon membership acquisition. And that's why I hope that this webinar will help in maybe subduing some fears and maybe addressing those fears with concrete recommendations. Without further ado, I'd like to just walk you through the agenda. First of all, moving forward, once I'm done with this introductory part, I'd like to ask Carlotta Colli, high official from the Italian Embassy to Serbia. Carlotta, benvenuta. Grazie per essere con noi. And thanks once again to Italy for this very precious support. After that, we would have actually a presentation of 3 papers that we have conducted throughout the past year. Each paper would have essentially a 10-minute presentation. And the first one would focus on Lex Specialis and public procurement. Once the presentation part is over, you, the audience, would have the opportunity to ask questions and pose comments, and I hope it's really engaging and interactive. And Milos Pavkovic would be in charge of this part of this webinar. Then moving to second session, we would have another 10 minutes with George Dimitrov presenting his findings on the role of OLAF and EPPO. EU is basically investigative agencies that are giving a lot of trouble to those officials in different member states, yet alone in candidates. Who dare to think about some corruptive activities. And of course, upon his presentation, you would have another opportunity, 10 minutes, to discuss the findings and ask questions and comments to Georgia. Final part of that part of the session related to findings would allow Milos to take the floor again, with him presenting his findings of another paper that has focused on anti-corruption efforts as part of the reform agenda, which were introduced as part of the enlargement process through the new growth plan, that is the Reform and Growth Facility. Upon getting all that feedback from the Western Balkans, this webinar was envisioned as to allow EU also to give us their input. That is, on the one hand, input from Luisa, who is an expert from Osservatorio Balcani, a close Italian colleague, and a very known organization. And we look forward to her comments and overall concluding statement in this front as well. And then we will go to Ruslan Stefano from CSD from Bulgaria, who is again one of the most prominent organization in this area of field, and we really think that this would make an overarching perspective when it comes to anti-corruption, so that we can also learn from member states' experience on what mistakes not to repeat. and then we would conclude the webinar. And I really hope that this fits within 90 minutes, because this topic is so complex and so big that we could talk an entire day about it. Without further ado, I have the pleasure to give the floor to Carlotta Colli. Carlotta, per favore.
Thank you. Thank you for the very kind invitation and the warm welcome also in Italian language. Thank you. First of all, allow me to convey the apologies of His Excellency Ambassador Gori. Unfortunately, he was supposed to be here for the opening of the webinar, but unfortunately, due to a family loss, he was due to travel back to Italy, but he conveys his greetings and best wishes for the success of the program. So thank you once again for inviting us. I think this is a great opportunity to listen to the interesting results of the program that we have been funding. I had the pleasure to participate in a previous meeting and discussion on this topic with the European Policy Center and some of the panelists present here today. And I think it's very good that we reach a final stage of the program and we are now able to disseminate the results and made it public. Allow me, I'm not going into, of course, the technical details of the topic. You mentioned earlier that your agenda will be very rich in this webinar. You will listen to many experts and panelists who will give you an overview, not only on the 3 papers that are object of the program, but also on a broader picture on fighting corruption in the Western Balkans. From our side as Italian Embassy, we would like to provide the participant with this seminar with an overview of where we stand as Italian government when it comes to enlargement to the Western Balkans and our vision. First of all, as you know, the Italian government attaches the highest priority to this region and to the enlargement. We see this as a key strategic investment, and we think there is a need, especially in this geopolitical situation, to have a new security architecture, and enlargement is one of the most strategic investment that the EU can do. So we strongly support that, and we want to see all the Western Balkans part of the EU as soon as possible. This is our commitment, and this is how we work both at the policy level, in a discussion in Brussels, of course, and also this is the division we support also through this program, like the one you are presenting today. Our vision is based on 3 pillars, I would say, just to summarize them. The first one is the gradual integration. We think it's very important to make sure that candidate countries can be closer to the EU even before accession. And to do so, we need to work together, of course, on reforms and to make tangible progress that are visible to citizens in candidate countries. Just to give a few examples that you certainly know, the Euro single payment area, which makes bank payments less expensive for everyone, or the EU roaming also program. Now, Moldova and Ukraine will benefit from that, but we are committed to make this possible also for the other countries in the Western Balkans. The second important point is the strategic communication. This is really key because we need to, the last, as you know, the last Eurobarometer research shows that we need to do much more in this regard, both in the EU countries and in the candidate countries. We need to work together to make sure that citizens can really see the tangible impact in their daily life from the European perspective. And we are encouraging that. And again, even through webinar and programs like this one today, we can show what would be the benefit of reforms on the life of citizens. And this is, again, is key. And of course, it's very much linked also to the growth plan and the reform agenda. It is important to keep all together working on that to bring this European perspective closer. And the third pillar, which again is very important, is simplification, streamlining. Italy, the Italian government is working to make procedures and measures for accession simpler, and of course always based on a level playing field. This is a commitment that we have together with other like-minded countries, and we keep working in this direction. So coming to the webinar today, I know you have a rich agenda. I'm not taking too much time, but of course fighting corruption is one of the most important topic for discussion. It's very much linked to prosperity, to legality, to all the important reforms that are part of the agenda and the commitment of the countries in the region. So thank you once again to the European Policy Center for doing this important and evidence-based research. Thanks to all the researchers for their 3 papers. We look forward to listening in details all the important results, and those results will not just stay in the paper, but will be a very important very important information for decision makers, for policy makers. So we really value the work of think tank like this one and many other in the region. And final point, I'm happy to see, of course, Luisa here in the webinar and Osservatorio Balcani. Another key issue for us is to connect, of course, actors in the region, and especially with our Italian think tanks and organizations. So thank you once again to all of you. And I'm just finally mentioning that is in the webinar today, also our financial attaché. We have a financial attaché at the embassy. And of course, it deals with the topics you are discussing today. And I think you will be also an important partner for the follow-up. Thank you to all of you and enjoy the webinar.
Grazie mille, cara Carlotta. Thank you once again. And I have had the pleasure to meet different member states and even into Italian representatives of Brussels. So they were informed as well of this webinar. And they told me they also look forward to getting the results. So we'll really make sure that the results remain relevant as the next year is approaching. And finally, of course, I think this is indeed an added value of the webinar, of the project actually, is that it builds bridges with different member states, but in particular Italy. And once again, it's Luisa's contribution and presence indeed makes this project, in that case, stand out. Now, with that part covered, I'd like to move to the first paper on Lex Specialis and public procurement use or misuse of. And before I give the floor to Milos, I wanted to make this webinar a bit interactive, something that you might have approached before or not. In any case, I'm talking about polls. I would like to share a poll that will set the tone of the upcoming discussion. And as Milos will take the floor, he will be able to reflect on these anonymous findings. And once his 10-minute speech is over, we will have another one that would conclude his session and allow you food for thought to pose questions and comments for another 10 minutes. So I'm launching first poll of this webinar. And if anybody can signal if you can see it. Milos, you can see it? Okay. So the first question, as you can see, this is your personal opinion. It doesn't need to be expert-based. This is not a quiz. We're not expecting you to know. But based on your personal hunch, what do you think? How well aligned are the Western Balkan countries with EU directives on public procurement and procurement of utilities? That would be the first question, and you can see basically that this is a scale from 1 to 5, ranging from not aligned at all to well aligned. And the second question goes as following. The practice, in your opinion, the practice of using Lex Specialis for avoiding public procurement procedures in the Western Balkans is. Thus, it ranges from it's not used at all. That'd be for the best, I suppose, but I don't want to influence your answers, all over to widely used. So I see the answers are still incoming. So we'll give you maybe 5 more seconds to select an answer and before sharing the results. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Last comment, last answers are incoming, and I'm glad it's still incoming, but I need, as a moderator, to pay attention to the duration. I'm ending the poll, sharing the results. Here we can see, Milos, please take a look, that most people are of the opinion that we're somewhat aligned. There might be differences across the regions, but I'd like you to comment on that. Whereas the second question is that Lex Specialis is indeed occasionally used, whereas the minimal answer is not used at all. So with that said, I give the floor to Milos for the next 10 minutes, and we would have another 10 minutes. And please feel free to post questions and comments once Milos is done. Thank you. Milos.
Thanks, Strahinja. Very interesting results. Of course, I will share the findings from my paper just for people to see whether they were right or not. Of course, we have to have in mind this question was regional, and of course, results may be individual, but generally, I think that the participants had a good sense of how things are standing with both regarding the alignment with the EU acquis in this relevant area, but also with the usage of Lex Specialis. If you allow me, I'll just quickly share the screen for my PowerPoint presentation. Give me just a second to find the. Okay, share. Here it is. I now share the screen. Can somebody confirm that you can actually see my screen?
It says Milos has started screen sharing, but we don't see it. It says double click. Now we can see it. Excellent.
Now you can
Thank
see
you.
it. Okay. So the title of my paper is actually Lex Specialis as Modus Operandi, Analyzing Public Procurement Systems in the Western Balkans. And I have to say that past year was really interesting and challenging for me personally dealing with this topic, because as you already mentioned, it's a complex, it's a huge topic, but I think that the results are really interesting and it was worth worth my time. Just a quick introduction to the topic. As most of you already probably know, Chapter 5 is the one dealing with the public procurement, and after European Union revised its enlargement methodology, actually it became part of Cluster 1 fundamentals. So it added weight on this specific chapter. The idea of today's presentation is to provide a regional overview on the public procurement in the Western Balkans, so alignment with European Union legislature, law, and practices, EU acquis, but also to explore how often Lex Specialis or special laws practice is used in the Western Balkan countries, because this is something that has been heavily criticized by both the European Union and experts in the region. I also take a glance at the Reform and Growth Facility and how this instrument deals with the public procurement and Lex Specialis practice. I analyzed anti-corruption measures within this instrument, and I mostly used European Commission's documents for my results, be it annual country reports or rule of law reports, or the documents referring to the Reform and Growth Facility and reform agendas. But these are basically my key sources of verification. Coming up with hypothesis that, of course, a Lex Specialis per se, if widely used, it definitely hinders both, in the first place, competition in the countries, but also hinders indirectly EU integration of a country, and it also opens the doors for unchecked public spending and erodes public trust. So let's start quickly with the general overview of Western Balkans. So here you can see the table with 3 columns. First is a level of alignment from the European Commission's report in last year, 2024, but also level of alignment from this year's report, 2025. This is the alignment with 2 most relevant EU directives on the public procurement and procurement of goods and services. And you can actually see that when we go through the countries, that there hasn't been much changes between on a year-to-year basis. So basically, Albania is largely aligned, Bosnia and Herzegovina is partially aligned, North Macedonia is largely aligned. The only change was actually with Montenegro, but this is only the change of the name of category. In 2024, it was well aligned, and in 2025, just aligned, but still it highlights the good level of alignment of Montenegro. Montenegro actually is the only country that closed Chapter 5 in accession negotiations. Kosovo is only partially aligned, and then Serbia is broadly aligned with the relevant EU directives on public procurement. On the far right column, we actually have the level of preparation when it comes to Chapter 5 per each country. We can see a mixed track record here, starting from Albania, which is moderately aligned. So Albania, North Macedonia, and Serbia are moderately aligned. Montenegro has a good level of preparation, and Kosovo is between some and moderate, and Bosnia and Herzegovina has some level of preparation. So when we take a look at these findings, we can see actually very mixed track record in alignment with directives and level of preparation when it comes an overall public procurement area. Now moving on to individual countries. This is a short overview of Albania. Albania has been progressing steadily when it comes to public procurement, with some certain challenges still persisting. It adopted its first public procurement law back in 2006, and since then had 9 revisions, last in 2024, and it is largely aligned with EU directives, as I already mentioned. But some of the persisting challenges are, of course, connected with corruption, insufficiently attractive investment environment, which affects the competition in public procurement, capacity of state institutions, and also what is very prominent in the Commission reports is widespread or let's say broad usage of this category of international consultancy agreements in the areas of strategic interest. So if something is deemed as a strategic interest, it avoids public procurement procedures. When it comes to Lex Specialis practice, it has some special laws that deviate from the public procurement, like law on concessions and public-private partnerships and law on strategic investments. Unfortunately, I'm losing time, so I have to speed up a little bit. Moving on Bosnia and Herzegovina, general overview that Bosnia and Herzegovina is regional laggard when it comes to public procurement. It adopted its first laws back in 1998, but since then had several revisions. It is only partially aligned with EU acquis. Key challenges start with underdeveloped e-procurement system, staffing shortages in public procurement agency, and also when it comes to reform agenda, delayed adoption. It adopted its reform agenda only this October, and it missed a lot of opportunities also in this area when it comes to delayed reform agenda. It doesn't have a widespread Lex Specialis usage. It has defined some in the article some exceptions, which is mostly in line with EU acquis and EU practices. Moving on to Montenegro, it is fully aligned. I already mentioned Montenegro provisionally closed Chapter 5. It is well aligned with EU acquis, but it also has some challenges like understaffing and process irregularities. But these challenges are rather minor compared to the other countries. Reform agenda has a strong focus on public procurement, and what is very important, although Montenegro has closed the Chapter 5, it will need to maintain a good track record when it comes to public procurement. It has only narrow defined exceptions for certain areas for Lex Specialis, but what was concerning is that several international agreements have been signed, and this is with the United Arab Emirates, which tend to avoid public procurement procedures, and it is under scrutiny of the civil society and probably European Commission as well. Moving on to North Macedonia, it has good alignment with EU directives. Also, a lot of changes and amendments to the public procurement law, but is largely aligned with the EU acquis. Some of key challenges: limited competition and high occurrence of irregularities and corruption. Also, understaffing issues. For instance, this Department of Administrative Control has only 8 people and on a downward spiral. So generally, public administration is not very motivated working in the public procurement area. Reform agenda highlights public procurement as a key area for reform. So this is the goal is to increase competition. It also has a widespread usage of Lex Specialis. It was mainly through this law on strategic investment, and it was heavily criticized in this year's European Commission's annual country report for North Macedonia. Kosovo has mainly stagnated when it comes to public procurement, as it remains a low priority of the government. Combined with the political issues in Kosovo, that's part of the answer why the new draft public procurement law has not been adopted for 3 years. There are examples of corruption and fraud outside the conflict of interest and unlawful cancellations of public tenders. These are all challenges that are burdening Kosovo. Also, weak contract management and non-compliance with the opinions of Public Procurement Commission is something that is notable issue in Kosovo, but it doesn't have a widespread Lex Specialis use, only a few built-in exceptions. Finally, reaching Serbia. When it comes to Serbia, it has a solid alignment, but stalled progress in recent years when it comes to public procurement, broadly aligned with the EU acquis. Some of the key challenges are decreasing number of bidders, bid rigging practices, and avoidance of public procurement procedures. Here, coming to the Lex Specialis, this is one of the biggest issues with Serbia, because as a rule, the biggest infrastructure projects are actually excluded from public procurement law and done through direct agreements and international contracts or special laws. Some of the notable examples are Belgrade Waterfront, Morava Corridor, Expo 2027. These are all special laws that actually skipped competitive procedures. But Serbia also added few reform steps in its reform agenda in order to improve transparency by publishing international agreements, and committed to abandon the practice of Lex Specialis after 2027. So here is the regional overview shown in the table. So we can see actually that 3 countries are using Lex Specialis. These are Albania, North Macedonia, and Serbia, while Kosovo, Montenegro, and Bosnia and Herzegovina have only exceptions, which is mostly in line with the EU acquis and EU practice. Some of the key conclusions is that we could see that there are frequent changes in public procurement laws. Sometimes they can disrupt smooth implementation, but sometimes they are just meant to refine and align legislation with the relevant EU practices. Administrative capacities is a shared concern with most Western Balkan countries when it comes to public procurement, and also an issue of competitiveness. So we know that our economies are small, and sometimes we have segmentation of market. So usually we have a very low number of bidders on public tenders. These are some shared problems of the Western Balkans. And here we are coming to some of selected recommendations that I would like to present for today. So I divided them in 2 categories. First, for the Western Balkan countries. Of course, Western Balkan countries and governments need to continue alignment with the EU acquis and practices in this area. They also need to work on and strengthen the human and technical capacities of their relevant public procurement bodies and offices and relevant departments. But they also need to more narrowly define exceptions from using public procurement law, and avoid using Lex Specialis practice, special laws, and international agreements, except for these narrowly defined exceptions in the law itself. When it comes to the European Commission, key recommendations would be that, of course, Commission should continue regularly monitoring state of play in this area. It has also to pay special attention and scrutinize the practice of special laws in the Western Balkan region, as it has done so far. It needs to react early to create some early warning system for serious breaches of competitive procedures in countries, because if European Commission doesn't react early, it can actually leave lasting consequences on Western Balkans competitive procedures and competition in general. This would be end of my presentation, and now I'm opening the floor for questions and answers from your side. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Milos. And while we're waiting for questions and comments, if there are any, I would like actually to share another poll. And this one is related to your recommendations that you have just outlined. Give me a second, please. So this is only one question. It is related thus to our inquiry. To select recommendations you deem the most important, and this is a multiple choice question. If you like to choose 2 or 3, it's up to you. So the recommendations are most relevant to take care of the public procurement issues as outlined by Milos. So the first one is that the reform agenda should be used as a basis to kickstart and maintain reform focus in this area. The second one is related to the European Commission, that it should update the Reform and Growth Facility scoreboard more regularly, as to allow us to better monitor the ongoing developments. The third one is again related to the Commission, that it should consult civil society and regional experts when assessing implementation of the reform agenda. Then the Western Balkan countries should strengthen institutional capacities to fight against corruption. And finally, when assessing the reforms...
Sorry to interrupt. Yes. Sorry to interrupt, but these are recommendations for the second paper. You mix them up.
For your second paper, I apologize. Yeah. So let me just double check. I hope I haven't confused my numbers.
Yeah.
Yes. Let me just... I'll share the results nonetheless. Let's keep them in mind. I apologize if I have mistakenly mixed up the polls. But here you can see nonetheless that basically all the recommendations are valid. Please keep them in mind later. And I apologize, this has never happened to me to mix up the polls. But yes, Milos, just keep these in mind that the most answers were given. That the focus should be on the actual enforcement of the reform steps, not just of the adoption of strategic documents. I will ask the audience to double check now another poll. I just need to see if I got it correctly. Yes, Milos, that is the one that they should strengthen human technical capacities.
Yes, that's the one. Yeah, that's the one.
I'm relaunching. Again, I apologize to 80 people that are following this. I think it's not a big deal. So if you don't mind me asking again, this one is supposed to address the recommendations Milos talked about. So the first one, you will see that we're asking the regional governments to strengthen human and technical capacities of public procurement offices and their relevant departments. The second one is that the region should more narrowly define expectations from the public procurement. Then that the Western Balkans should avoid actually using Lex Specialis. Then we have a recommendation for the EU as well, that the EU itself should scrutinize more carefully the practice of Lex Specialis in the region. And finally, the EU should react with an early warning system for serious breaches of competitive procedures in candidate countries. So I'll give 5 more seconds, and then, or maybe 10, because there's a lot of text. And then Milos can reflect on the findings while not sidelining completely the other findings we got. Keep them in mind for the third part of the session. And this is a good lesson for me as a moderator, that numbering of polls matters, and that I hope this hasn't confused the audience. So we'll end the poll now, and I'll share the results. Milos, please take a look at them and tell me when you can start.
Thank you, Stahin. I think that we have an even distribution, more or less, between recommendations, which tells to me actually that all recommendations are equally important and relevant for both the governments in the region and the European Commission. And of course, for more individual country recommendations, I will refer you to my publication, which be up and ready by the end of the week at the European Policy website. But I think we also have one question in the question and answer category, and I would like to read it here and provide an answer. So it was from Nadir Rejepi, who said, I realized the presentation was related to normative alignment of Lex Specialis, while I consider the operational applicability in my country. Of course, I couldn't go much deeper in this presentation because I had only 10 minutes. So I provided the overview of alignment with the EU acquis. We don't know which country here is in question. I guess it's probably either Kosovo or Albania. So I would refer Nader to my paper once it's published, so to explore more in more detail how his country is standing when it comes to Lex Specialis in operation applicability. It's not how to say. it's not completely forbidden to use special laws practice in your country. The whole idea is to use it only in these the already defined exceptions. So basically, if you want to use to have some exceptions, you need to have them already in the public procurement law. The practice that is criticized is that often completely new laws are adopted which go beneath the public procurement law, and this has an impact on competition, on on general public procurement system. But I hope that I answered Nadia's question, but I will also refer him to the publication by which will be published. Analysis will be published by the end of the week. Do we have any questions additional?
Share on social media.
Yeah.
And I forgot to mention one more thing. All the findings that Milos has shared during the presentation and in the paper have been validated by the regional experts as well. Of course, he, having done research from Belgrade, that could have a certain extent of depth. But this went beyond by having all Western Balkans covered by our Think for Europe network, a network that has been ongoing since 2013, that has expertise in this area, and they have allowed Milos, particularly when we had this workshop recently, to update the findings and really stay up to date with the all relevant developments on the ground. With that said, I don't think we have any additional questions for you, Milos. You will have time to readdress the audience after George is done. Yeah, I think we've covered this quite effectively and right on time. Now, moving to another topic that is related to what the EU agencies can do to engage in tackling the analyzed issue of anti-corruption. Carlotta Colli, also from the Italian embassy, mentioned that Italy prioritizes gradual integration, which actually is supposed to build bridges between EU member states and candidates sooner rather than later. And as part of that bridge building, we thought that EU agencies that tackle corruption could play a bigger role. And that's why when we talk about OLAF as agency for investigation of fraud and EPPO as a European public prosecutor, we really thought that this was a really under-researched topic. And out of the three, I can be biased that this is the one that I think I was most keen on learning about, particularly given that it has been under-researched thus far. So no pressure on you, George, but I think other people will be also keen on learning more about the role or potential of these agencies when it comes to engagement with the Western Balkans. Without further ado, I will repeat a poll. This time I'll double check it's correct. And there are two questions which will allow George to build upon. So on a scale from 1 to 5, we were just curious, to what extent are you familiar with the work of the two agencies vis-a-vis the Western Balkans? So take your time, take a look. The second question is, what do you think should be the main focus of these agencies? And the second one is multiple choice question. One way for them to move forward is to engage in investigative cooperation. The second one on protection of EU funding. Third, and this is relevant from the gradual integration perspective, to prepare candidates' institutions for EU membership. And finally, to keep our countries in check to prevent and deter fraud. The responses are incoming as we speak. And I suggest we have 5 more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And I'm ending the poll. Sharing the results. Here, as you can see, there's nobody that is fully familiar, but we have people that have nuanced understanding. And I think before we started the project, we could fit into this different categorization, but definitely not fully familiar as we might be now. So George will, of course, address the concerns you might have. For the second one, it's perfectly balanced, I might say. And I intentionally put it as a multiple choice question because indeed issues cannot be put to a single answer, which refers the necessity of these agencies, that they can play a multiple roles when it comes to assisting Western Balkan countries. Thank you very much. I give the floor to George to reflect on the findings and, of course, share his presentation. Thank you. We cannot hear you, George.
Yeah, thank you, Sakinyo. You gave a really good introduction to the topic, especially the relevance of the issue, corruption issue, of course. And as we know, like according to corruption perception index, the Western Balkan always ranks among the lowest. So like as one of the most corrupt regions, the most corrupt region in the world. In addition, only worse in Europe are Russia and Belarus. So of course, and especially after the collapse of the canopy in Novi Sad and the involvement of the EPPO, this topic gained a lot of prominence. And of course, when seeing the poll results, kind of to see like that most people are, of course, like not familiar. Kind of sounds expected. I think that it was 34%, especially as, for example, EPPO is a new organization, and I think that most people heard about it for the first time, like when Laura Kövesi opened investigation, where OLAF mostly works behind the scenes. So let me share the presentation, and we can start. So how we conducted this research? We examined.
You can play, sorry, just the full screen. Click. Excellent.
Yeah, it's okay now. Yeah. So how we conducted this research, so we analyzed all publicly available documents from OLAF and EPPO. We also analyzed the commission reports, and we conducted the interviews with the representatives of OLAF, EPPO, and the Western Balkans representative who wanted to take part in this research. So first, I want to explain what's OLAF. So OLAF is not an independent agency, but is a part of the European Commission. So it was established in 1999. By the Commission decision, but that decision changed in 2013, amended in 2020, and it currently works under that legal framework. So what it does, it conducts independent administrative. It's important to highlight administrative investigation, hearing, and audits, but it cannot initiate any prosecution. So like what it does. After it conducts investigation, it actually can give recommendation to the European Commission or to judicial actions, such as like to prosecutors in the EU or in, as it says now, in candidate countries on what to do. Like it can withdraw funds. But what's also important is that it has a global mandate. So like wherever EU funds are used, doesn't matter if it's the European Union, if it's Serbia, or if it's the United States of America, it can investigate, it can come. So it doesn't, so like what's also good about them is that they can come, they're completely independent. They can just come and conduct their investigation. So like they don't need some special approval from the country receiving EU funds to come and investigate how the funds were used or misused. So I want to talk about now what gives them the right in the Western Balkans. What's the legal basis for their engagement? So first is the Article 50 of the EPA framework agreement that's signed with every Western Balkans actor. So the Article 50 of those agreements specifically said that OLAF has the right to come and to investigate on EPA funds. Then also with the reform and growth facility for the Western Balkans, but also reform and growth facility for Ukraine. Chapter 4 gives authorization to OLAF to exercise its mandate and come and complete investigation on the funds used from the new growth plan. Also, in addition to those, Kosovo Police and Public Prosecutor's Office of North Macedonia decided to come to simply strengthen that cooperation and to sign administrative cooperation agreements. So, of course, they actually just have that aim, just to strengthen that cooperation, just to make it even more formal than it is. but in essence, it did not change the fact that OLAF already had a mandate and jurisdiction. It could already come and investigate. So based on the OLAF reports from 2014 to 2024, we see that OLAF in total conducted 71 investigations. Most of those investigations were conducted in North Macedonia and in Serbia. Then, of course, we see that they also conducted more or less the same number in Bosnia and Herzegovina, Albania, Kosovo, and Montenegro. So we also talked with them. We tried to ask them how those investigations look like. Did the countries cooperate? And we did find that actually the Western Balkans countries cooperated, and that of course OLAF had a lot of success in recovering EU funds and preventing corruption. Some of the, for example, probably the best known case at the moment is the case of Albania, when they conducted investigation on misuse of agricultural funds, and then issued a recommendation to the European Commission, which now froze any additional funds to Albania's agriculture. So that's just one of the examples. Of course, there's more. Of course, also it's not just about investigation, but also there are other means how OLAF cooperates with the Western Balkans. For example, they have the framework agreement says that the recipients of EPPO funds, they need to have AFCOS units. So those are units within the Ministry of Finance, which are in charge of monitoring corruption and the use of EU funds. So of course they have joint conferences, which of course has the aim to connect all of them, and of course not just with them, but also with their EU counterparts, strengthen cooperation, share good practices, and actually improve monitoring of those funds. They also organize workshops. They have a joint session. They have annual digital trainings and stuff like that. So the purpose of that is actually just to strengthen and actually make them more connected and, let's say, Europeanize the Western Balkans anti-fraud connection, just make it more European, share good practice. And of course, when you prevent corruption, when you improve and strengthen that fight, you actually get more stable country, and a lot of things just go and change as it goes. So when it comes to OLAF, EPPO on the other hand is something completely new. EPPO is a European Prosecutor's Office. It was established formally by the Council regulation in 2017. But of course, because of the long procedure, it became operational in 2021. Laura Kovesi currently heads the office, so she was elected in 2019. But what's so important to say that it's a form of enhanced cooperation on prosecution. So not all member states take part in it. Only 24 out of 27 at the moment. So Denmark, Ireland, and Hungary are not participating for various reasons. Some of those reasons are, of course, conflict with the national law. So, for example, the national law of Hungary and Ireland does not allow at this moment for them to take part in the DPPO. But although they're not official members, they actively cooperate with them. So what they do, they actually investigate. But in addition to investigation, they also prosecute all those criminal offenses related to fraud, corruption, and cross-boarding, some tax sorry, morning brain. So all those tax things that could affect EU funds. So many argue whether the EPPO has jurisdiction or no. Of course, because that's a kind of specific thing, but EPPO has a jurisdiction according to the Article 23 of the EPPO regulation. Anyone receiving the funds, of course, because those receiving the funds are, of course, prone to jurisdiction, and how that's explained. So because the Article 23 states that if the crime is partly committed in the EU member state, EPPO has jurisdiction. So how's for example, a crime that corruption takes part in Serbia, partly committed in EU member states. So because the funds are issued from either Belgium, in let's say 90% of the cases, and in some percent of the cases, the funds are released from Luxembourg, because the funds are released from the member state, the crime partly happened in the EU, so the EPPO can come and investigate. Also, Article 129 of the EU financial regulation also directly states that anyone receiving EU funds is subjected to EPPO's regulation, and EPPO has the right to come investigate. But unfortunately, they can come and investigate, but they cannot prosecute anyone in a non-EU member state. They can, of course, try something with the European Convention on Mutual Assistance in Criminal Matters, which, of course, gives OLAF the right to ask the local authorities to help them and provide mutual assistance. So far, what we heard from EPPO, EPPO has been those cooperation have been rather successful, and the country so far did not reject their assistance requests. So also, in addition to that, regulation establishing Western Balkans and Ukraine facilities as part of the growth plan, also in the same article, actually, same chapter as the case with OLAF, also gives them the right to come and to investigate and conduct all necessary actions to prevent the misuse of EU funds and bring those that misuse them to justice. And as I said, the only limitation they currently have is that they cannot bring indictments in courts that are not part of the EU member state, not just EU member state, but also part of the EPPO. So when it comes to early membership opportunity, because it's not part of the Commission, it's a separate entity, we try to see if there's a chance for the Western Balkans to take part in them, maybe as some form of observer or associate members, but unfortunately the membership at the moment is only limited to EU member state. But no matter that, of course, Articles 99 and 104 give the right for the third countries to strengthen some cooperation in form of agreements, some informal exchange or liaison offices, and we have those working arrangements. 4 out of 6 Western Balkan states have signed those working arrangements, with Serbia being on the way. So some changes in the national law are needed for the working arrangement to be adopted and to become official. So currently, it's in the stage that the parliament needs to give some draft. The draft is pending some parliament's agreement, but due to the situation, internal political situation in Serbia, that's now been postponed. But regarding Kosovo, there's no public information on it, why it's halted, and what's the current status of it. But the EPPO welcomes them, and the EPPO said that they, of course, did strengthen cooperation. They did help when it came to cases, and that they see them as a positive thing. So in addition, we also issued some recommendation to both OLAF, EPPO, and national authorities. So the first thing that we actually recommended is to integrate cooperation with OLAF and EPPO in EU accession benchmarks. So when the EU assesses the progress made in those countries, in Western Balkan countries in the following year, in their annual progress report, we want them to see directly in those reports what are the benchmarks from those cooperation, whether the working arrangements are respected, whether their implementation had some bring some positives. Then recommendation number 2 is to improve reporting on EU candidate countries cooperation, which of course goes in line with the recommendation number 1. So we want to see something more concrete in those reports. We want to see if it's at least a paragraph, but just openly and directly saying what has been done and what can be improved. Then the third recommendation is to include in the accession treaties that new members cannot refuse to cooperate with EPPO. So as we've seen from the example, so 3 EU members are not part of the EPPO, and EPPO is of course a voluntary organization. But so we see that because of the scale of the corruption in the Western Balkans, some Western Balkans countries might refuse to take part in it. So we want to make it mandatory for them, and that way, strengthen the role of the EPPO, and of course address the concerns that many EU member states have when it comes to the corruption and Western Balkans. Recommendation number 4, to finalize and implement working agreements with the EPPO. So we would like Serbia and Kosovo to finish those working arrangements as fast as possible. And of course, for all of those that have signed them, is to fully implement them and to improve their cooperation with the EPPO, as of course that would just bring to better a better cooperation and tackling the issue of corruption. And 5th is to promote public visibility of anti-corruption measures and efforts. But what's most important with that is for the people to know what they do, how they function, but not just they know how they do, the public know that they can actually report the crime anonymously to both EPPO and OLAF. So on their web pages, there's a form where every citizen can, of course, say, hey, just type, I think that this happened, the corruption. EPPO monitors that, EPPO addresses that. And what's interesting that, of course, most of the hints EPPO and OLAF got actually was given anonymously from those forms from the citizen. And another important thing which I'd like to emphasize is that most of those actually reports and tips that come to EPPO actually came from the Western Balkan countries. So actually that would actually bring as if, of course, the national governments know that their people can report it anonymously, not just the people, but not just random people and citizens, but also some people working there that are maybe forced to take part in the corruption. They are actually going to think twice about what they're going to do, and if they're going to do something with the EU funds, knowing that they can be reported anonymously and that OLAF and EPPO can come and investigate that. So I'm now I'm open to your questions. I hope that I didn't go over 10 minutes. Unfortunately, it's a broad topic, so we can talk about it for more and more. But I wanted to give more floor to you and to ask more questions. If you're interested in anything, if you're interested in recommendation, or in some cases of where OLAF and EPPO made some changes and tackled corruption, I'm open to answer them.
Thank you, George. Yeah, right on time. And I was present at some of those interviews, and for me, it was indeed fascinating that basically anybody can go right now on the website, type in what they suspect of being bad practice, and agencies would account for it. And they were desperate for additional input. I mean, for me, it was very encouraging, and I invite all participants to spread this message as well. Before we conclude, just a short, and I encourage you to pose a question or a comment, but as this might be, I don't know, sensitive topic, feel free to reach out to us in private as well. You have our emails, and then we can continue the discussion as well. I'm launching a poll on the recommendations George just put out, just for us to have maybe a better understanding whether and to what extent, and this is a multiple choice, you find these as relevant as we do. The first one is related to incorporating their work as part of benchmarks, so that the Commission would need to reflect on them in annual reports, and of course, then member states decide. Then to improve on actual reporting, because it was difficult for us to find what is the level of cooperation. So it shouldn't be difficult for anyone. Then to include them in accession treaties, and I can be biased, that's my favorite one. I think it's really something that should not be given to countries with bad track records in this area in the past, even if they sort out some of the issues right before membership. Working arrangements with the EPPO, that's another one. And finally, promote the visibility, which is something we're currently doing and will continue to do, particularly as this video will be available online. So we're finalizing this in 5 seconds. I see the responses are still coming. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm sorry if I interrupted somebody, but I need to close this poll now. Georgia, you have 1 minute to just reflect on this, and then we need to give the floor to Milos again.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, I mean, like now, especially now, like with the relevance of the investigation of the canopy, and of course knowing the scale of the corruption, I see like why people like think that integrating in accession benchmarks would be important, and why the European Commission needs to like have more saying on it, and especially if we go with that fundamentals first. As we know, like a fight against corruption is one of the fundamentals in EU accession process. So like, yeah, that actually makes sense. But I see that like people like more or less have equally distributed their answers and see like all of the recommendations as relevant. And of course we do see them. We of course cannot rank them, and it would not be like justifiable to rank them, because like they all like tie up together, and they all like, of course, when they all implemented, are actually going to lead to like substantial improvement in the overall scale of fight against corruption.
Thank you, George. And I really need to say a really special thank you to the audience. I mean, we've reached already 1 hour discussion, and we have the equal amount of participants. I mean, we always want to impress the audience, but the fact that nobody has left essentially is quite encouraging, and we thank you for that. And I hope Milos keeps their attention as well, equally, with the final presentation before we go to the 2 EU IMPO speakers after him. And the focus of this one will be on anti-corruption and how these tie up with reform agendas. I'm launching the penultimate poll. It's a correct one, don't worry. I won't force you to vote twice. So the first one is more general. What is your opinion on the overall state of play in the anti-corruption area of the Western Balkans? Again, it's a scale from 1 to 5. And the second one is more concrete. And I'm quite curious about the answers you might give out there, which is to what extent, or what is the percentage of the reform agenda steps on average, so the Western Balkan perspective, is dedicated to anti-corruption. And I already see that debate will be quite interesting based on the findings that are incoming, and that only I, as the moderator, have the privilege of looking as they are arriving. So I'll keep it in suspicion, and then maybe 5-ish seconds more. So I kindly ask the audience to conclude with their responses in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and last one's coming. I'm ending. So Milos, please pay attention to the results. As you can see, moderate has acquired the most votes, moderate level of state of play, let's say, moderate level of preparation. But the second one, I think, is the most interesting one. They've made a realistic assessment, so between 15 and 35%, we can all agree, let's say 25%. So 1/4 of the reform agendas are dedicated to reforms in the anti-corruption area. What is, Milos, actually the state of play? What is the percentage of reform steps that are dedicated to this area? And what would you present us as part of your pre-prepared presentation? We look forward to your findings.
Thank you, Slahinja. I'm really glad. I have to say, I'm really glad that we still have high numbers of participants at the webinar, so I'm happy to share the results. Interestingly, this time for the first question, participants were mostly right, so between some and moderate level of preparation, then depending from the country to country. But when it comes to the second question on the percentage of reform steps that are closely tied with the anti-corruption area, this is the first time that today, at least, that participants were not correct. So basically, I will state the answer right now, and then I will explain it in the presentation. So the correct answer is around 5%. So only 5% of reform steps are concerning the anti-corruption reforms. So this is the correct answer. Now let me share my screen and move on to the presentation, and then explain the results. So let me just click share. Okay, can you see the
the
screen?
number of participants even increasing, so it's a good thing.
Amazing, amazing. So in this paper, I actually wanted to compare reform agendas and actually provide a review of anti-corruption reform steps in each Western Balkan country. I can actually, because we don't have too much time, maybe I can skip this introductory part about the Reform and Growth Facility and what does it mean. I think everybody already knows, but the whole idea of Reform and Growth Facility was to introduce a stricter conditionality and in a way reinvigorate enlargement process. But when it comes to the anti-corruption area, we have a mixed track record between Western Balkan countries. Some of the common issues concern limited institutional framework, weak coordination with law enforcement, weak track record on investigation, prosecution, indictment, and conviction of corruption, especially in cases of high-level corruption. And also it has to do with effective verification of asset declaration. So these are the issues we are talking about when we talk about the growth plan and anti-corruption measures in the Western Balkans. But it boils down to the hypothesis that Western Balkan countries have formally committed to tackling corruption through the reform agenda and signal political will, but translating the commitments from the paper to reality is a lot harder than it looks like in the beginning. So with that said, I will quickly go through this table, which leans on the European Commission's country report and assesses the level of preparation in the area of anti-corruption. So you can actually see on the table, on a scale from 1 to 5, that countries are somewhere between 1.5 and 2.5. So not really good. So the overall state of play in the region is somewhere in between 1 and 5. So there is a lot of room for improvement. And only Montenegro reached the good progress, while other countries either have some limited progress or no progress at all. This is the state of play that we are talking about right now. So when it comes to reform agendas, we had actually in total 26 anti-corruption reform steps across the 5 reform agendas. Bosnia and Herzegovina adopted its reform agenda very late in the process, so it wasn't included in this calculation. And these reform steps varied from some general, like adopting anti-corruption strategy, to some very concrete reform steps, like establishing new institutions or improving number of indictments or court rulings and confiscations. And in some cases, fight against corruption and organized crime were merged, because we all know that these two actually categories are somehow intertwined. So starting with Albania, Albania had actually three reforms with additional nine reform steps. First one concerns establishing an asset recovery office and the national coordination unit. The asset recovery office was formally established, but it is still questionable. It's is it operational, and is it delivering the results? And this is, and also the second reform step was to submit an application to join the European Network of Asset Recovery Offices, which has been done. When it comes to other reform steps and reforms of the Albania, they are due at a later stage in 2026 and 2027. So we can see that one of the reforms is to strengthen repression of corruption or organized crime, including high-level cases, and also to effectively prevent corruption. And this is a more transparent asset declaration system, which was due by the end of 2024 and was fulfilled, as far as I know. But also some other reform steps that are incoming in the years to come. When it comes to Kosovo, it has one reform that encompassed additional 5 reform steps. This was like more general, improving efficiency of fight against corruption through prevention and repression. The reform steps that were due by now was to adoption of anti-corruption strategy, But the Kosovo government was unable to adopt the strategy because of the ongoing political issues, parliamentary elections, local elections. The government was not elected, so now we will have new elections. So this actually prevented actually stronger focus on reform. So basically, all the reform steps listed here are still awaiting implementation. When it comes to Montenegro, it also went with the approach of having like one bigger reform with 3 additional reform steps. This reform actually encompassed some other international commitments, like aligning with GRECO and OSCE recommendations from 2022. When it comes to its anti-corruption, to its reform steps in the anti-corruption area, Montenegro actually started adopting the first step on integrity tests, but it is due by the end of this year, so we don't know, we don't have full indicator here. Also, increase of vacant position. There are some progress there, but still this step is due by the end of this year, so we don't have indicator. And the final step on improving concrete results on investigation, prosecution, and judgments is due by the end of 2027. But I have to say that, as already mentioned before, that there have been some improvements in this area, as well as we have some investigation and prosecution, including high-level corruption cases ongoing. Just 2 months ago, one former Minister of Defense was arrested on the charges of corruption. So there are improvements in this area as well. When it comes to North Macedonia adopted 3 reforms in the anti-corruption area. One deals with 5 additional reform steps. The first one covers allocating additional resources to the prosecution offices. The second one deals with and this is due by the end of this year. The second one deals with the increasing number of investigation, prosecution, and final judgments, including seizure and confiscation of properties, and including high-level cases. And the third one covers increase of capacities of investigative centers within the Public Prosecution Office, which is also due by the end of 2026. When it comes to Serbia, Serbia also has one general reform, which is improved fight against and prevention of corruption, with 3 dedicated reform steps. First one is to adopt the anti-corruption strategy and action plan, which was done in July 2024. So this one is already checked, but it has been criticized by civil society as not as inclusive as civil society would hope for. The second is to fill out all vacant positions of prosecutors and judges in anti-corruption departments. The deadline for this one is December 2025, so we still have to wait and see final indicator. And the step number 3 is actually proven track record in investigations, prosecution, and final judgments, including seizure and confiscation of property, including high-level corruption cases. I have to say that in the case of Serbia, a big wave of anti-corruption investigations has been launched in February this year. It has been ongoing following the Novi Sad tragedy. However, the experts and civil society are afraid that this has been done under political influence, as this wave of anti-corruption investigation was launched actually by President himself, which opens the question of how executive is involved in the work of judiciary and in prosecution. So some common conclusions when it comes to this analysis is that still we can see a stark contrast between formal commitments and tangible results. This is partly because majority of reform steps are due by the end of this year or next or the year after. So we still have to give some time to the governments to deliver the results. Also, the clearest progress that we can see is in Albania and Montenegro, who have demonstrated early signs in building institutions, in strategic initiatives, and increased number of investigations. North Macedonia remains hampered by political instability, under-resourced institutions, and slow legislative implementation. As I already mentioned, with the case of Serbia, there are some reforms. There are some arrests that happened, but they are still under political polarization and influence, and still we are dealing with weak institutions, which is quite problematic in this area. And I would like to conclude with an overall remark that reform and growth facility and reform agendas actually offer great opportunity, but the success will depend on political will in the Western Balkan government, and it is it's not the reform agendas are not a magic wand, so it's just a policy document. But bottom line is that government would need to deliver, and it will basically, in the end of the day, depend on the government commitment to implementing reforms. And without that, I think that reform agendas can remain a dead letter. And finally, moving on to the slide with recommendations.
Also recommendations, Milos, sorry, because we're running out of time. I will also share the results.
Yeah, so
the ones that was already replied, so you can wrap up in 30 seconds. That'd be great.
So basically, we can see actually that the recommendation that received the most support is actually that the government should focus on delivering reforms, not only adopting documents. This is something that is clearly winning the support, but also the one strengthening institutional capacities also tells a lot about institutions in the Western Balkans and the necessity to build strong and independent institutions alongside all other recommendations that are all of them are relevant, but we can clearly see that these two recommendations definitely garner support. And also for the European Commission, I think really that the Commission was criticized about its scoreboard that was recently published, but it's not as quickly updated as things are developing on the ground. And also the recommendation of the Commission that consulting civil society and regional experts can be very useful for adjusting and updating the scoreboard more regularly. So this is from my side, and we already saw the results of the poll. So if there are any comments and questions, I would love to address them. Thank you, Strahi.
I've already received, thank you, Milos, some emails to ask for presentations. So just text me, strahi.subotic@cep.org.rs, and we can send you the presentations and later on the papers. And now I know that our EU colleagues, Ruslan and Luisa, were quite eager to jump in. I know we're running out of time. We have 10 minutes left. I wish we could have more time for your maybe deeper thoughts, but maybe if we can start with Ruslan, just for a couple of minutes, your maybe impressions of the findings and fit it within your ongoing work as well. Thanks. And then Luisa, you take the floor afterwards.
Thanks, Strahinja. Do we hear each other well?
Perfect.
Well, first of all, thank you for the European Policy Center in Belgrade for leading all this. I think this is extremely important, and thanks for the invite. As always, I would say the role of civil society and organizations like CEPS become extremely important in these recent years, because we've seen a backtracking on the global level on the focus on anti-corruption. And this includes, of course, Europe, which has been distracted by the war that's leading in Ukraine. But it has also meant that we have lost a lot of allies in the work on anti-corruption. And of course, we have seen a degradation in the instruments that are focusing on anti-corruption. If we look at the rule of law report that the Commission is still carries on, these are less focused and less assertive on anti-corruption as compared to the anti-corruption report that we've had earlier. And one of the things that we've seen and is very visible when talking about the European Public Prosecutor's Office is the lack of anti-corruption champions in the region. You know, Lara Kövesi was the last one that was in Romania, and since then we've lacked a strong, clear advocate for anti-corruption. Now, governments are not fond of anti-corruption. This is important when we talk about all the technical work that has been done. The EU is really expert, and I can ascertain that from the focus on Bulgaria and Romania on anti-corruption, the different mechanisms for monitoring, which have now been removed. As you know, Bulgaria will be a member in January 2026 of the Eurozone, which means now it's fully integrated into the EU. That doesn't mean there has to be a stop in the work on anti-corruption, and that it's clearly not a destination but a journey, and that journey depends a lot on what we as civil society do every day, which has been shown very clearly in Ukraine. You know, I really want to kind of commend our colleagues in Ukraine for actually working on anti-corruption issues, even as the country is at war. Clearly, this is I would say, a stark example for the Balkans, and particularly the Western Balkans, that education and anti-corruption begins at home. And we haven't seen any such examples across the region whatsoever for a very long, long time. I would say the last decade essentially has been a lost decade in that respect. And I would say we need to take a step. And the fact that for protest has been going on in Serbia and across the region for the past decade is very, very important. Let me finish by focusing on I think the key takeaway from what we heard today, and that's implementation. There's been just too much box ticking and too little implementation, including the work of the EPPO. Not just have European members not being part of the EPPO, but also the Achilles heel of the EU is in the implementation, because it relies on the capacities of the member states, and these capacities have been very diverse across the union. And I think one of the key results to focus on, also in the area of public procurement, which is by far one of the most affected by corruption, is making sure that there is a clear policy will, which I don't see anywhere in the Western Balkans, frankly. You know, if you want to have a clear, open, transparent public procurement process, there are so many examples in the EU, including in Bulgaria, you know, which has one of the most transparent public procurement processes overall. But then when it comes to implementation, it's a very poor track record. I mean, and this is where the continuing efforts are in both Bulgaria, Romania, and a lot of Central and Eastern European countries. We can track every euro and where it goes. And when you see that this is clearly not just, very not aligned with the policies, but also openly corrupt in some areas, and there is no follow-up from the judiciary, then that creates a lot of antagonism in society, a lot of readiness for protest. This is the two things that we need to change, and I commend the European Policy Center and your Italian colleagues for keeping the fight. I do think this is getting another step closer, and I look forward to engaging together in the future to continue our anti-corruption reforms in the region. Thank you. You're muted.
Thank you very much. And given your organization's well-known portfolio and the amazing track record when it comes to pushing forward this topic, we truly appreciate your words, and I'm sure that our paths will cross again so that we can both together push this topic forward. And now, last but not the least, Luisa, I know you're also short in time. We started with the Italian state representative. Now we're ending with an Italian think tank representative, I give you the floor, and please wrap up the discussion from your perspective as well. Thank you very much.
First, thank you very much for having engaged me in this conversation already in Belgrade a few weeks ago. I really recommend everybody to read these papers. They are rich of information which are very useful for understanding things better. Let's say also, although they are technical, they are very, very readable and clear. I want to say that among the things that impressed me was nonetheless that the skepticism around the reform agenda should be some kind moderated by some advancement that we saw. It's clear that we still need some kind of external incentive for the region, with the exception of Serbia, where the students' movement has been, on its own, able to recall the importance for democracy of the fight against corruption. The rest clearly still needs support in terms of, giving and taking. I have to say, in the minute that remains, that it was not mentioned strongly today, but there is a reference in the paper of the importance of not leaving understaffed the offices that deal with anti-corruption, because the retention of experts, but in general, this is an issue. And one little point I want to make before it's done is that indeed, the European Union has problems of enforcement, also with its own member states. So the move ahead with EPPO, that I would call EPPO, are very important. And at the same time, in the Western Balkans, on occasions, this political response to this drive for anti-corruption then becomes some kind of witch hunting, which does not necessarily respect human rights of the people that are accused of corruption. So we should still, as civil society, ask for the fight against corruption, because we know it is high level and it is very problematic in terms of democracy. But at the same time, we should not forget the importance of the fundamental democratic rights that also accused interlocutors have.
Thank you very much for being respecting the time and yet being so precise. I mean, this is quite a feature on your side. Thank you very much. Looking forward to moving this topic again with you, Louise, as well. Thank you for your input, which was incorporated as part of the papers as well. And I think we can draw a lesson based on the discussants' input, is that even when the accession process is over, the work doesn't stop there. Many of the challenges will continue to burden the region. It's best to start learning from each other's mistakes sooner rather than later. And I think this will fit well and feeds the debate on safeguard clauses. At the Enlargement Forum, everybody was talking about the necessity to prevent and deter post-accession democratic backsliding. So I do truly believe that these papers can fit into that part of the debate as well. With that said, I thank you all, the panelists, the discussants, the guests who have followed us for exactly 90 minutes. I repeat, you can check out this video on YouTube. Our papers will be online very soon. We shall have also 3 infographics and a podcast by the end of the week. So stay tuned. Thank you for your support and attention, and let's stay in touch. Thank you very much. And I wish you goodbye.